Hi, and welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point. The network is AFR Talk, the most feared and dangerous radio network in the country. And again, I want to talk about this woman in this piece in the London Telegraph, this woman making my case that we need to stop the practice of Muslim immigration primarily because in large part, I'm not saying this is true of every Muslim. There are plenty of Muslims who've immigrated to the United States. They've left behind their Muslim ideology, their Muslim worldview, their Muslim practices. They've integrated themselves into American society, and they've assimilated. It does happen. But I'm saying that's not the driving impulse in Islam. The driving impulse is to remain separate, to remain segregated, to remain apart with the long-range goal of taking over Western civilization. They are not interested in taking part. They are interested in taking over. That's why the Muslim Brotherhood, their manifesto from 1991, they want to eliminate and destroy Western civilization through a plan of sabotage. They're going to sabotage our miserable house from within, pull it down around our ears. They want to put the flag, the hammer, the crescent and star. They want that flag to fly over the White House. This is not secret. This is not a conspiracy. They've told us this is what they're going to do. They've said this is what they're about. They're not even trying to hide it. And yet we have chumps in American politics that are falling for this and think we need to open our shores wide open to people that come into this country with a plan to sabotage and destroy us. And by the way, we don't have to let these people into our country. Some people think that they've got a right to be here. They don't. Congress has the right, according to the Constitution, to set whatever parameters for immigration they want. That's in their purview. It's not up to the administration. It's up to Congress. And there are Supreme Court cases that make it clear that our government can screen people out based on their ideology. Nothing wrong with that. Communists were not allowed to immigrate to the United States. And the Supreme Court said that's absolutely fine. That's part of what a sovereign nation can do. So if a sovereign nation decides, look, we're going to stop the practice of immigration from Muslim majority countries, then the Supreme Court said that's fine. That's what Congress can do. Congress has that authority. Whatever parameters they want to establish, they can do it. If they want to establish it based on ideology, they can do it. If Congress says, look, we're going to stop the practice of Muslim immigration because Islam teaches its people to kill infidels, teaches them that Jews are descendants of apes and pigs, that's fine. They can do that, and I believe that the time has come for us to do that. Now, I may be a lone voice crying in the wilderness. I think Andy McCarthy said something of the same thing. Robert Spencer has said the same thing, but right now we're kind of a minority. And again, I want to be clear. I'm just speaking for myself on this. Our organization has not taken an official position on Muslim immigration, so this is just me speaking for myself. Now, here's what she says, this Jane Kelly. The streets around Acton, which has been my home since 1996, have taken on a new identity. Most of the shops are now owned by Muslims, and even the fish and chip shop and Indian takeaway are halal. It seems that almost overnight, it's changed from Acton Vale, V-A-L-E, into Acton Vale, V-E-I-L. Of the 8.17 million people in London, 1 million are Muslim, with the majority of them young families. This is not in reality a great number, but because so many Muslims increasingly insist on emphasizing their separateness, it feels as if they have taken over. My female neighbors flap past in full niqab. By the way, there's an imam in Saudi Arabia saying that baby girls ought to be put in burqas, ought to be concealed from head to foot to protect them from molestation by males, which, maybe that is a peek into what they think is the typical mind of the Islamic male, that's how they're wired, to take advantage of helpless little infants. It says more about the way they look at Islamic males than anything else. But he's out there saying, look, we got to put these baby girls in burqas head to foot. My female neighbors flap past in full niqab, some so heavily veiled that I can't see their eyes. I've made an effort to communicate by smiling deliberately at the ones I thought I was seeing out and about regularly, but this didn't lead to conversation because they never look me in the face. I recently went to the plainly named curtain shop and asked if they would put some up for me, if they would make some curtains for me. Inside were a lot of elderly Muslim men. I was told that they don't do that kind of work and was back on the pavement within a few moments. I felt sure I had suffered discrimination and was bewildered, as I had been there previously when the Muslim owners had been very friendly. Things have changed. I am living in a place where I am a stranger. I was brought up in a village in Staffordshire, and although I have been in London for a quarter of a century, I have kept the habit of chatting to shopkeepers and neighbors, despite it not being the thing done in metropolitan life. Nowadays, though, most of the tills in my local shops are manned by young Muslim men who mutter into their mobiles as they are serving their phones. They have no interest in talking to me and rarely meet my gaze. Women simply have no stature in Islam whatsoever. I find this situation dismal. I miss banter, the hail fellow well-met chat about the weather, or what was on TV last night. And then she contrasts this with other kinds of immigration. Poles, people from Poland, have settled in Ealing since the Second World War and are well assimilated. But since 2004, about 370,000 East Europeans have arrived in London. Almost half the populations of nearby Ealing and Hammersmith were born outside the UK. Not surprisingly, at my bus stop, I rarely hear English spoken. I do feel nostalgic for the days when a journey on public transport didn't leave me feeling as if I had only just arrived in a strange country myself. In the 90s, when I arrived, this part of Acton was a traditional working class area. Now there is no trace of any kind of community, that word so cherished by the left. Instead, it has been transformed into a giant transit camp and is home to no one. The scale of immigration over recent years has created communities throughout London that never need to or want to interact with outsiders. And then she points out in the last decade or so, 600,000 white Britons have left London. You've got white flight out of the city of London, 600,000 in the last decade. I too, she says, have decided to leave my area, following in the footsteps of so many of my neighbors. I don't really want to go. I worked long and hard to get to London, to find a good job and buy a home, and I'd like to stay here. But I'm a stranger on these streets, and all the good areas with safe streets, nice housing, and pleasant cafes are beyond my reach. In other words, she can't afford to live in places where there's some sense of community. I see London turning into a place almost exclusively for poor immigrants and the very rich. It's sad that I'm moving not for a positive reason, but to escape something. So that is what's going on in London. Now let's grab a couple of sound bites. Let's grab clip number 2, Rob. This is Leon Panetta, Secretary of Defense, and this is interesting because he has a major oops moment because he admits here that waterboarding was one of the keys to helping us get Osama bin Laden's score one for George Bush. Let's listen.
And the real story is that in order to put the puzzle of intelligence together that led us to bin Laden, there was a lot of intelligence. There were a lot of pieces out there that were part of that puzzle. Yes, some of it came from some of the tactics that were used at that time, interrogation tactics that were used. But the fact is, we put together most of that intelligence without having to resort to that.
So that's fine. We didn't have to resort to that for most of the intelligence we got. But some of the pieces of the puzzle came through the interrogation tactics. He's talking about waterboarding there. It's not torture. Went over this before. It's not torture. Very useful. People think they're drowning, but they're not. If you're going to drown them, that's torture. If you make them think they're drowning, that's not torture. That's mind games, perfectly permissible. It is not a form of torture. Now here's Leon Panetta, clip 3, making excuses for what happened in Benghazi. And again, we covered this and linked at the time. There were Delta Force type forces that were 2 hours away, and they were scrambled the moment this alert was received that the consulate in Benghazi was under attack. They were in Signorella, Italy, 2 hours by plane from Benghazi. And remember, That event lasted for 7 hours. The last 2 Americans that were killed, those former Navy SEALs, were killed at 4 in the morning. The attack began at somewhere around 9 p.m. Local time. So there were 7 hours. Only need 2 hours to get from Signorella, Italy to Benghazi. Here's Leon Panetta making more excuses for what happened.
Well, the important things to do are, first of all, you've got to build up the host country capacity. In the end, these embassies do depend on host country details that provide security. So you've got to try to develop.
This shouldn't be more Marines. This shouldn't be.
No, that's you're not. Let me get the rest of the points.
All right.
The second is you got to harden these embassies as much as possible, and the third is that we've been working with the State Department to determine whether additional Marines ought to be assigned to that area. And in the end, then, the final alternative is our ability to respond and having our troops in a position where they can respond quickly. But I have to tell you, a lot of that still is dependent on whether intelligence tells us that we've got a problem and gives us enough warning so that we can get to the place so that we can respond.
Did you have enough time to get there in time? You didn't have enough warning, General Dempsey?
No,
Benghazi.
we did not.
Said, no, we did not. Well, the whole thing lasted 7 hours, takes 2 hours. That's 5 hours they could have been there on the ground, and at least 2 American lives could have been saved. And again, huge problem here, lack of Marines, violating every standard of prudence and intelligence when it comes to protecting your diplomatic staff. Nobody on site. And, we've talked about this before. Hillary Clinton wouldn't let the guards at our embassy in Egypt, in Cairo, have ammunition in their weapons. They were just there for show. Now, here's something on the Islam issue. A story today from Associated Press. Remember the attack on the USS Cole? Remember, that happened in the year 2000. The guy that's accused of orchestrating the attack, we have him in custody. We've had him at Guantanamo Bay since 2006. And get this, he's just now facing a pre-trial hearing. This is a hearing even before the trial starts. This happened 13 years ago. 17 American sailors dead, 37 wounded. We've had the guy in our custody, and he hasn't even been tried yet. We still can't get that guy, the Hassan that shot up Fort Hood. We can't even get that guy's beard shaved. And then I've got another story in the stack where a soldier accidentally shot and killed a fellow soldier. He's already in prison for 3.5 years. It happened in September. Focal Point AF, our top.